What's up, y'all? Today is I'll talk to you guys about a story. So sit back, listen to this story while I go ahead and do my walk. So if you don't have it already, go ahead and get you something, drink, and chill out. Cause we about to kick it off. Well, I'm about to kick it off. Yeah. So I'm gonna tell you guys a story today about the true dark ages and why they didn't tell this part of the story because today we're actually in the middle of going back to the dark ages. And see, the golden years weren't about, prosperity and technology. It was actually about defeating mankind's one big nemesis. The biggest issue mankind had in the time of the dark ages was sustenance, was famines is what the dark ages was about. Just think about it. The dark ages talked about plagues and disease and death. Well, they didn't tell you why this occurred. Because, and this is gonna rattle a bunch of people's chains, and I probably might get some bad flack for this, but the reason why the dark ages occurred is because of lack of food, not because of disease. It was because of lack of food. They even talked about during the dark ages, in the Black Plague and all that shit, that people were dying by the thousands. But they weren't dying because of disease. They was dying from starvation. Disease was just like a second part of that. The main food that they ate during the dark ages and during the Black Plague time frame was potatoes. These people were eating a shitload of potatoes and cabbages and all kind of shit. See, because they didn't really believe in hunting animals. They didn't believe in going out there killing animals and skinning them and cooking. They believed in fast food, just like we believe in today. And the fastest food to eat back in the day was vegetables. So for all them vegans and vegetarians out there, the fast food craze started with vegetarians and vegetables. Because ain't nothing quicker than going outside and grabbing your fruit and your vegetables off the bush, out of the tree, off the vine, and just eating the shit. That's fast food versus catching an animal, killing it, skinning it, putting it over the fire and waiting until it cooked. That's too slow. So this entire dark age bullshit came about because motherfuckers was starving and they were eating the wrong type of food. You can't survive off no damn potatoes and cabbages. Man, that shit right there, you'll be tore up on the inside. Not only that, you're not gonna have no gains. There's not gonna be any gains when it comes to that shit. We humans need protein. And see, the story starts like this. It starts when they started to figure out how to breed bacteria in order to substitute the animal products. They created bacteria, livestock. They created livestocks of bacteria. And just like the whales eat krill and plankton, they figured that they could do the same thing on land. And then they stumbled up on a bacteria that not only multiply faster, but if you cut this bacteria in half, you have two of the same bacteria. And that's what they call the beast. Now, the beast was such a profitable thing to people to those people at the time that they didn't even realize they was creating a deadly pathogen that was going to kill them. So just like today, they're making laboratory meat. They did the same thing back then in the Dark Ages and during the times of the Black Plague, and people died from it. But the bad thing about it is that these bacteria was set loose into nature to become an invasive species that infects all animals and all plants. That's the bad thing that came about it. The good thing that came about it was that all them people that believed in that lifestyle perished because they were trying to shape and form everybody in the world to that type of lifestyle. And guess what that lifestyle was called? Again, no offense, vegetarians. That's what that lifestyle was. They not lying when they say that the ancient people were vegetarians. Yes, a lot of them were vegetarians, but they found out real fast the power curve that they fell behind when they came across non-vegetarians. You're not going to build the same person that you would if you had a person that was eating vegetables, nothing but vegetables, versus a person that eats a combination of vegetables and meat. The person that's eating a combination is going to grow way faster, way stronger, and have a better chance of surviving than a person that's just eating nothing but vegetables. Not only that, the person that eats meat has a responsibility that the people that eat nothing but vegetables have. Because most people that eat vegetables don't cook their vegetables because they're under this assumption that it destroys the nutrients in it. Versus the person that cooks vegetables and meat, cooks their meat along with their vegetables. And this right here gives them the advantage because they don't suffer from parasitic infections as much as the people that don't cook their vegetables. So jumping ahead to this Black Plague shit, the reason why the Black Plague actually spread across Europe so bad is because most of them people were eating root-based, ground-based vegetables. They weren't eating a lot of exotic fruits and shit like that. They were mostly living off of potatoes and cabbage and shit like that, and radishes. And that right there is not something that'll sustain a population of people. And not only that, they were eating most of this stuff semi, if not raw, semi-cooked or raw, because they needed nourishment and they needed it fast because they were eating a subpar nourishment giving, substance, fruit, vegetable. So that's how they became so sick to suffer from the Black Plague. This story was told to me a while ago, but you can't just tell people shit like this because right now we're in the process of going back to the Dark Ages, utilizing fast food. Fast food is another form of this mindset that these vegans and vegetarians had because they needed food quick. Because imagine how much food you gotta eat when it's nothing but vegetables and you only have a certain amount of people or plants that can produce these vegetables. The average vegetarian eats a week's worth of vegetables per meal than the average person that eats meat and vegetables per week. So we would have like a side of vegetables, a side of meat, and that would be enough to satisfy us for that day when a vegetarian or a vegan has to have at least a half a week's worth of vegetables to sustain themselves. If you're looking at how many vegetables a vegan eat versus a regular plant and meat eater, it's an overwhelming amount. And say, the thing is that we don't realize that you got to eat enough of that stuff to sustain yourself, because the body is trying to pull the nutrients out of it, and these are unprocessed nutrients. This is the advantage that meat eaters have. The meat eaters have processed nutrients because the animals eat the vegetables up beforehand before they're slaughtered. So those nutrients are on standby. And see, all the religions are talking about this in their texts, but they're not teaching it because, believe it or not, this is a cult that's teaching people the fastest way to get out of this bitch. Believe it or not. The fastest way to get out of this bitch is to starve yourself and die. If not, get killed, or be poisoned. So they're teaching us the total opposite of sustainment. Now, the reason why it's so important to know this is because, like I said, we're back in that cycle again, utilizing fast food to put us right back into the dark ages. If you recognize the stories they told us about the Black Plague, the time of the famine, some of that stuff matches up with the stories that they talk about in the Bible, with the 7-year famine. But see, what we got to realize is this right here. When they're talking about years in these scripts, right, they're actually talking about seasons, signs and seasons. There's 4 seasons per year. So when they're saying 7 years, they're actually talking about 7 seasons, which is a year and 3 months, or a year and not 3 months, because it's 3 months per season. So a year and 9 months. So when they say that Israel went through a famine for 7 years, they're talking about a year and 9 months. Now, why is this famine so important? It's because a lot of people died during that process, and they were eating the same things that the people that had food were eating. And what was that? Vegetables, grains. They didn't talk about nothing about animals in that process. So when the first domesticated animals came about, in the form of pigs, sheep, goats, cows, and shit, these were saviors. These were salvation for people that were starving. So they spoke about this in the form of religious freaking apostles and fucking messengers and stuff like that. That's what they describe these animals as, because these animals brought salvation to the human race. So what that has to do with the dark ages is this right here. Most of the people, if not all of the people that were documented in the dark ages, were all vegetarians. They were all vegans, and they didn't believe in eating animals. And the reason why they suffered so long and died so quick is because all of the vegetables and shit that they stored were infested with rats. So the rats were not afraid of humans, and the rats ate and shit and pissed over all their shit. And just like today, with the fast food, they were into that fast food shit back then too as well. So if they were hungry, they would go out to the storeroom, grab a carrot or an apple or a cabbage and some shit, and they would just start eating on it, not caring that these rats shit and pissed over all their food. So they were poisoning themselves utilizing this fast food method. The same shit that's going on right now today. Most people that get sick from fast food get sick from unclean products. If you're cooking the meat is being sterilized by heat. So what are they getting sick from? That's an unclean product. The vegetables. They're not cooking the vegetables. And these vegetables are sitting up collecting bacteria, onions, tomatoes, lettuce, and pickles. They're collecting bacteria and they're throwing them on these sandwiches, and people are eating a culture of bacteria. That's why they're getting sick. It's not that they're getting sick from the fast food, they're getting sick from the uncooked fast food, which is the vegetables. Now, I'm not trying to beat on vegans. I'm not trying to beat on vegetarians. But I do want to point out that we already watched these people, not on one occasion, but two occasions, get wiped out. And who do you think was sitting back documenting this shit? The meat eaters. They were sitting back watching this and documenting it. Because to tell you the truth, once a person becomes septic, it's hell getting them, curing them. And that's what they were driving themselves to. There's a few stories about this, man, that have been skipped over and weren't even told to us about how the Dark Ages and the Black Plague came about. And the reason being is because you need to utilize all your resources. When the pig was created, when the pig was bred into the existence, because it's a domesticated animal, it was bred into domestication. People didn't want to chase a herd of animals 10 miles just to get 10 of them. It wasn't worth it. So what they did was they decided to crossbreed species of animals that were already domesticated by nature and animals that were herd animals. So what animals do you think that they bred in order to get the pig? A land animal, most likely some type of bovine, like a buffalo, with a rodent to get the pig. And the pig was a domesticated animal to the core because of the rodent, his rodent ancestor, so it wouldn't run away from us. But not only was the pig a good thing, but it was a bonus because it could survive in nature alone by itself without domestication as well. So in 1 year, or what they call 7-year famine, which is 7 seasons, so a year and 9 months, they created enough pigs to provide subsistence for the entire world. Now, if that's not a savior, I don't know what is. And that's just 1 year, or a year and 9 months. And they talk about this story in the Bible. They talk about it in all the religious texts, where these messengers or prophets came and spread the word and saved the nations. This is what they talking about. You know, contrary to popular beliefs, metaphors were used in these religious texts. It was up to us to figure it out. Well, back to the Black Plague and everything. When they first started experiencing people dying during the time of the Black Plague, they were dying from shit like hay fever, pneumonia, and, colic. I know colic and hay fever and pneumonia are very curable these days. But when you living what do they call it? A restricted life where you don't believe in medicine and all that shit. You just believe in living off nature the way nature provides it. You forego any, backup plan when people start to get sick. See, because even the herbs contain bacteria. You have to sterilize the herbs before you consume them. And see, what people don't see is that when you live a raw diet, you actually forego all the health benefits of those nutrients that you're intaking because of the existing bacteria in there with it. It's like a counteraction. So they weren't cooking their food. They were living in a fast food, environment. And it didn't take that long for these people to start seeing the effects. But by the time they realized what was happening, because they did create cultures of bacteria to consume with their food in order to get that protein that they were lacking from not eating the animal products. And that's what happened. That's what caused the Black Plague. Those cultures of bacteria that they were utilizing as protein. They're doing the same thing right now. They're creating fake meat in the labs. They're creating it from animal protein, but they're not telling you which animal protein they're creating it from. It's not beef protein. It's not poultry protein. It's not pork protein. It's bacteria protein. The same shit that they did in the Dark Ages and during the Black Plague time frame to provide subsistence to a nation, or not a nation, a large group of vegetarians. The same shit they're doing today. So if you don't believe it, look into how they're making this impossible meat, this lab-grown meat. It's being made from bacteria protein, from parasite protein, from parasite meat. Because bacteria has the ability, if you cut bacteria, a bacteria cell in half, you literally have 2 living bacteria cells. And if you take those 2 bacteria cells, cut them in half, you literally have 4 bacteria cells. You see how the multiplying goes? To them and to the average person, that seems like a good thing because your food multiplies exponentially, right? But the bacteria, if not killed, will continue to multiply inside of the person that's consuming it. And the reason being is because these organisms are not flesh and blood. All right? Based off the principles and principalities of these organisms, they are considered spiritual. They are considered etherical, meaning that they're invisible to the naked eye, but they still affect you physically. Sounds familiar, right? Sounds like that little shit they be telling us about. We're not dealing with flesh and blood. We're dealing with principalities, spiritual principalities, however they fucking say it. They're literally telling you how the people of the Black Plague and the people in the Dark Ages were actually brought to their doom. And the people that were standing back and documenting this shit didn't participate in their lifestyle, which, i.e., is vegetarianism. Think about it. The people that tell the stories of the shit that happened back in the day were the people that weren't affected by it. And the people that weren't affected by it were the people that didn't live that lifestyle. And the lifestyle that these people lived during the Dark Ages and during the Black Plague time frame, they were all vegans and vegetarians. I can't make this shit up. They said that these people lived off potatoes and cabbages. That's not a meat diet. That's a vegetarian diet. And in the Dark Ages, they said that everybody was vegetarians until they started dying and shit. Well, let me let you in on a secret. Vegetarians, not all of them, but a lot of them, don't cook their food thoroughly because they have this belief that by cooking the vegetables, you're cooking the nutrients out of the meat or out of their vegetables that they call the meat. And then they discovered, like the whales that eat plankton and what do they call that shit? Krill, that they're actually eating a subspecies of half plant, half animal, and that sustains them. I.e., how the whales get so damn big. But that happens in the ocean. A totally different, environment than on land. So their scientists realized that they can take bacteria and create the same effect that the whales have in a laboratory, in a culture, in a dish, in a petri dish. And then that blew up because it became successful. They created so much bacteria protein that they were able to sustain their entire nation. So for a while, they were in the golden age. They were living high off the hog until that shit began to make them sick because they didn't realize that they couldn't slip up and eat this bacteria raw, because when they realize that splitting the bacteria makes two bacteria, even if you do chew it up and digest it, these things still live in the body. And that's how the Black Plague began too as well. It was passed from the rodents to the vegetables to the humans. The Dark Ages was the same way. And they talked about this stuff in the religious text. The reason why we weren't taught about it is because the Bible's taught backwards. The Bible actually starts at Revelations. It doesn't start at Genesis. Genesis is the actual end of the Bible. Because the way the Bible was interpreted, it's interpreted from Hebrew to English. And Hebrew is written from right to left. Right? If you start a story, let's say you had a story that was laid out, all the pages, right, were laid out on the ground separate, and you had to start reading it. Well, the way we were taught was to start at Genesis and start reading all the way to Revelations. But that's not how Hebrew is interpreted. That's not how Hebrew is written. You would have to start at Revelations and read your way all the way back to Genesis. Because Hebrew is written from right to left. So if you start the story off at Revelations, it starts off as everything is a utopia, heaven on earth. Then it's destroyed by what? The beast. That beast represents the technological discoveries they made when creating those proteins, when creating those bacteria proteins, the one that had to be cut up, and multiplied like that. So when you get to the point where the beast comes from the abyss and it starts killing everybody, and you had to get the sign of the beast and all this shit, all of that is telling you that they recognized who these people were and what they were doing. Just like today, we recognize vegetarians and vegans, and they'll let you know who they were in the first place. They'll let you know that they're vegetarians and vegans. So the mark doesn't have to be something on your skin. It could just be an identifying marker, or you identifying yourself as that, which a lot of them do this day and age. So check it out. When you get to the point where Jesus is introduced into the story, you already got to the point where the Savior was created, where everybody was being fed. When you get to the part where Abraham is introduced to the story, Abraham and Sarah, you've already passed the story about the creation of the Savior, which brought about the creation of many generations, which is Abraham and Sarah. And then you work your way all the way back to Genesis, and the last thing that's said on Genesis is the word. That's it. The last thing on Genesis is the word, because we're starting off from the end and working our way to the beginning. The story is really telling, man, because it'll show you a timeline in our history where we actually lived like that. The famines, the wars, the destruction with giants, which is not giant, it's actually Gigan, and Gigan is the word that creates giant, and it actually comes from the word ogre. And people were called ogre because of the deformities that they got from eating these damn bacterias. Now, an ogre has a big ass belly, starts to look green, and sometimes they have these large growths on their body. And I can understand why they would call these people giants, because they would have giant body parts, big ass giant belly, large tumors and shit growing on their body. And sometimes they would even grow at an exponential rate, like these people that's suffering from these gigantic diseases because of tumors they have on their brain. Now, all of these people were considered Nephilim. But guess where the disease originated from in the body? In the gut, i.e. the ileum, where the large and small intestine connects. Once the bacteria escapes that, it's fair game. You might as well just pick a spot, because that part of the body is going to start to deform and make growths and tumors. Now, I'm not just making this shit up. These stories are real, man. The story about the damn Black Plague in the Dark Ages is the story about fast food and veganism. The true fast food of today is not McDonald's making burgers. You still gotta wait for them motherfuckers to cook your food. It's the accessibility of being able to grow and grab grapes off the vine, apples out of trees, oranges out of trees, bell peppers off the bush, tomatoes off the bush, and just eating them right there because you consider them healthy, not knowing the ramifications of bacteria and bacterial infections. That's the whole reason why the story of the Bible is salvation. It's saving you from that shit. Because you can live in a literal hell on earth in your body, bro. Because these fucking bacterias can cause you to not even think straight. They can control your mind. And it's because we're not properly disposing of them in our food. At the end of the day, they're just proteins. Just like chicken, just like pork, just like beef. They're proteins. But they're proteins that when destroyed, they don't die. They just symbiotically produce other proteins. If you take a cow, kill it, skin it, cut it up into different pieces, each one of those pieces ain't gonna become a separate cow. But in the realm of bacteria and parasites, that's a norm. That's a normally. That's normally happening. That's something that occurs. If they've practiced on these things for hundreds of years and saw the ramifications of it. And not only have they gone from doing it in the food, they've created medicines that include these things too as well. For some reason, these people have an affinity for bacteria, for worms and parasites. And they feel like these things are the natural inhabitants of this land, of this world. That they are the true, humans. That they are the true beings of this world. I don't know who it was. I think it was one of those kings over there in England who said that if he dies, he wants to come back as a plague that destroys mankind. To be able to think like that and have that understanding, he knows these stories that they're talking about in the Bible. He knows them the true way. Because the bacteria and the plagues that were put upon people were caused by these cults, these cultures. These cultures that we think of today, like hip hop, the way you dress, the way you cook, is not the culture that's actually being sold to us. The culture that's being sold to us is that little organism that's living in a petri dish. That's living in a petri dish. That's the culture that they're selling to us today. The fast food culture is bacteria that's fast to order. That's a quick order. Bacteria, bro. The leading cause of food poisoning, and believe it or not, food poisoning is a bacterial infection. It's not like poison like cyanide or freaking or nightshade or some shit like that. It's poison as in a pathogen, a bacteria, where these little microscopic organisms, once consumed, are in the ideal environment where they can breed, where they can reproduce, and they can create waste. Billions of bacteria pooping, shitting, having sex, and reproducing inside your body is what causes these abnormalities like cancer, diabetes, liver, and all your organ failures, heart disease, plaque. All of that shit is caused by bacteria. It's not caused by cooked meat. It's not caused by cooked vegetables. It's caused by raw meats and raw vegetables because of the bacteria that it contains. If you want to stop having shit like heart attacks, strokes, aneurysms, diabetes, liver failure, clogged arteries, you got to get rid of bacteria. But we've created an industry for that right now. Another fast food industry. They got us thinking that bacteria can help us digest our food. But look, if bacteria is helping us digest our food, that means that the bacteria is eating the food too as well. And just like you eat food, urinate and shit, these bacteria are eating food and urinating and shit inside of you. So you ever wonder why the symptoms keep coming back when you introduce probiotics and prebiotics into your diet? Well, because you just replace one bacteria with another one. And you just that bacteria eats off the old bacteria that was causing you problems. And then now they later on become the problem that a new probiotic has to come in and take out. And when the whole object should be for you to not include bacteria in your diet at all. Because any bacteria, all bacteria, is not healthy for you. I don't care if it's yogurt. I don't care if it's certain types of pro and prebiotics. Those are living organisms that you're consuming. And if you're not defecating, urinating, perspirating, or respirating them out of your body, guess what they're doing? They are parasitic. They are eating and living off of your body. If that includes the food that you're eating or the tissues that they inhabit inside your body. I don't know about you, but just the idea of a bacteria parasite living in my body, helping me digest my food, is just like those old stories they used to tell us about tapeworms. People eating tapeworms on purpose so they can stay skinny, or the people that make themselves puke and they become bulimic or anorexic and shit. That's the same idea I get when I think about what these advertisers are pushing when they're talking about probiotics and prebiotics. And then not only that, the same ones that they're using in these pro and prebiotics, now they've turned around and they're starting to make meat of them. They're trying to make meat from this shit. Well, they're not trying. They already are making meat from them. And this is old technology back from the Dark Ages and from the time frame that the Black Plague was around. Because this was their way of replacing the eating of animals by eating bacteria. They're doing the same shit right now. So look, if you don't believe me, go to the store and try to find out this scientific meat that they created in the lab, what animal they got it from. And they'll tell you that they don't know. And if you keep doing your research and you keep digging into it, you'll find out they'll tell you, oh, it's the proteins that we're using to create this meat is from lots of different animals, a combination of animals. So in other words, it could be bacteria, protein, it could be horses, cows, it doesn't matter. But the thing is that something that starts from a cell, right, and multiplies, don't sound like no damn cow and horse and cat and dog protein cells, because they don't multiply like that. Our cells are created in our bones, and that's how we get cells. They don't multiply. Our cells don't have sex with one another and procreate. If you take a blood cell from a cow and you cut it in half, it's dead. It's done. It's not going to become two cow cells. It's dead. It's done. But these protein cells that they're using, you can cut them in half. You can pulverize them and make thousands of little pieces of them, right? Every one of those pieces is going to become another cell. That's how they're able to replicate this shit and turn it into meat. Now look, there's a silver lining behind all of this. Because this meat that they're creating is not actually deadly or detrimental to you. This meat that they're creating, once cooked, is just like cooking a steak. I'm not going to even lie to you. It's just like cooking a steak. It's just like cooking a chicken breast. It's deemed dormant. It's deemed not dormant. It's deemed neutralized. You can eat that just like you can eat a steak. But you have to cook it. If you don't, if you eat this shit rare, even medium rare, I'm going to say, fuck it. If you eat this shit where some of it's not cooked, the parts that's not cooked is going to come alive inside your body. That's the way it's created, and that's how it's going to be maintained. This meat will live a long time on the shelves as long as it's not exposed to air and water. Because air and water is carcinogenic to this shit. Oh, and yeah, carcinogens come from natural elements like oxygen. And all a carcinogen is something that's corrosive. That's why it's called carcinogen. And air and moisture is corrosive. It's an oxidizer. That's why we call it oxygen. Enough with that shit, though. Let's go back to the main purpose why all these people perished during the Dark Ages and during the Black Plague era. When you eat nothing but vegetables, you deprive yourself of animal proteins. And that's what builds muscles and allows you to create for men high levels of testosterone. Not saying you can't get that from vegetables, but since it's not processed and broken down like meat is, like the animals break it down, it's going to take your body longer to get that. So you're behind the power curve. And not only that, if you don't cook it, now you're introducing something else into your body, along with that, that plant protein. So think about this shit before you allow yourself to go down that road, because a lot of people don't realize it. By living a healthy life, you could be harming yourself. You could be harming yourself. Because a lot of people that have diabetes, they don't realize it ain't got shit to do with sugar. It ain't got shit to do with sweets. It's your pancreas that's involved. So if you heal the pancreas, it don't matter what you eat. You'll create insulin. Your body will regulate its own insulin. The same thing with purifying the blood, with the liver. It ain't got nothing to do with the meat or the vegetables you're eating. It's got something to do with the bacteria that's harming your liver. We got people today that's walking around with parasites in their liver and their pancreas, and they're being treated for an illness that doesn't have anything to do with repairing that shit. For instance, they're getting liver and kidney transplants when they can just destroy the bacteria that's affecting their liver and their kidneys. And you don't have to get no transplant. Same thing with your pancreas and your freaking what they call it, your thyroid. These things are targeted by parasites because these are soft tissue glands. The only thing you need to worry about is maintaining these organs, not fucking putting pig insulin in your body to give yourself to fix your blood sugar levels. Because believe it or not, that's another product they're getting from pork. Insulin. It's insulin from the pancreas of a pig, and they're selling it to us as artificial insulin. They're not getting this shit from no plants. Plants don't create insulin. Only animals do. So I don't know if people realize this shit when they're injecting themselves in their stomach for diabetes, that they're injecting another animal's insulin inside of them, because they're sure not using human insulin, because the insulin has to be created from the pancreas gland. There's people walking around today with liver flukes, and pancreas freaking pinworms. And they don't even know it because they can't feel their organs and their glands being attacked by these things. But see, there's a remedy from this shit, and the remedy is cooking your food. Believe it or not, you cook your food, you do not provide them with the substance they need in order to survive. And also, you're not repopulating their populations. See, because after a few generations of these animals, they actually breed themselves out of existence. Now, the animal that killed all those people during the dark plague, of the Black Plague in the Dark Ages, that one does not breed itself out of existence. That one only dies under the contact with heat, all right? Or if it's removed physically. That's the only way you can get rid of this thing, with heat or if it's removed physically. Now look, there have been people that have been able to get rid of these things throughout history, and we've never even heard about them. We've never even heard about them because it's not something that they're trying to do. If you happen to get these things in your body and you need to have them removed, you're gonna have to go through all types of issues before those things are removed. And they know this because whatever environment these things inhabit, they grow into the shape of that environment. Hence why they was finding those white fibrous things in the arteries of all of these dead peoples during the pandemic. But look, that's the last thing I'm gonna say about that. Appreciate y'all for coming out. Thank you for listening. If you did listen in, hit that like and share. I say I got one like, but hey, hit that like and share. Support your boy, because this information, even though I know it's broken right now, if you look into it, it's real. It's really real. So, again, thanks for walking down this road with your boy. And peace. I'll holler at you guys next time.